A few years ago, I wrote a post about why your credit score is not your adult GPA. I think we reran it just a few months ago. But there's a lot of people that get confused about credit scores, okay? And they start almost worshiping at the altar of the FICO score, trying to do things to get their FICO score higher and always thinking about their credit score and letting it really drive a lot of their financial decisions. And that's probably a mistake most of the time. Okay. A credit score, for the most part, goes up when you have a lot of debt and you manage it in some reasonably responsible way, not paying it off, but making the payments on it. That's the key to having a high credit score. So, having a high credit score in a lot of ways says, yeah, I borrow a whole bunch of money. So, that aspect of it is not necessarily awesome. But the problem these days is that credit score gets used for a lot more than just credit decisions, right? It might be used by your utilities company. It might be used by your landlord to determine how responsible or reliable you are. It might be used by a potential employer. It matters when you're going to get a security clearance with the governor or the government, maybe the governor, but primarily with the federal government. And so it's important not to have a terrible credit score if any of that other stuff matters in your life, and it usually does. The good news is it does not take very much to have a great credit score. Okay. And there's a lot of little ways that you can kind of game the system to have a great credit score. But for the most part, the way you have an awesome credit score is you borrow some money and you pay it back as you agreed to do so. That's the main way you have a good credit score. And you don't even have to do it yourself. You can bum it off your parents. Okay. My oldest came back from a mission. She hadn't had a paid job. She hadn't borrowed any money at all in the previous 18 months. I added her to my oldest credit card as an authorized user. I didn't even tell her the name of the credit card, much less the number. And I didn't give her a copy of it. I just added her as an authorized user. And 2 months later, she had some high 700 credit score, right? It doesn't take much. It's a goofy little system, but that's the way it works. And now she's got a credit score good enough to go get, whatever credit card or, probably even buy a house. The truth is, it doesn't take much to have a good enough credit score, a good enough credit report to get a mortgage, right? If you just get one credit card and you put your gasoline on it, nothing else, just your gasoline on it for the next year, you probably have just from that a good enough credit score to buy whatever house you need to buy. And most of us have more debt than that early in our careers, right? We've got some student loans, we've got a car loan, we've got a couple of credit cards, right? You don't have to go looking for more debt here. It takes a very minimal amount in order to have a decent credit score. But that's just not your most important financial number, right? If we're going to rank financial numbers, we ought to be talking about things like your gross income, your fixed expenses, your savings rate, your net worth, right? Those are the numbers that matter. If there's an adult GPA out there, that's what it is. It's not your FICO score, okay? So keep that in mind. So what goes into a credit score? Well, there's a few things. The most important one is an on-time payment history, meaning you paid as agreed. Not that you paid it off, but that you made the minimum payments every month on time. That's it. That's like a huge percentage of the credit score. The next thing on that list is the credit to utilization ratio. Okay, so this is the idea that you have a $20,000 credit limit and you only borrowed $200. Right? That's a very low credit to utilization ratio, and that increases your credit score as opposed to if you borrowed $19,000 of the $20,000 available to you. The length of your credit history matters, although, as I mentioned, that can be borrowed from your parents. The mix of your credit, right? How much is mortgage? How much is student loans? How much is credit cards and consumer debt, et cetera? That has a small effect on it. And any recent hard credit inquiries, right? There's hard inquiries and there's soft inquiries. Only the hard ones count. If you just applied for like 7 different credit cards, that lowers your credit score for a few months. But that doesn't have a huge effect and it goes away relatively quickly. Mostly, they want to know that you paid as agreed on the money you borrowed. That's what's going into a credit score. That's what causes you to have a higher credit score. Don't go crazy about it though, right? Once you get to whatever the number is, 740, 760, a higher number doesn't help you. right? Being 770 is no better than 760, and being 820 is no better than being 760. So trying to gamify this and getting your credit score up from 806 to 820 is not helping you. There's no benefit there, right? This doesn't mean more wealth for you. So there's nothing else that you got to do with that. As I look over our credit score recently, I saw that it went anywhere from 802 to 815. And I don't really care when it goes up or goes down. That's just from paying our bills. All our credit cards are on automatic payment. And that's all the debt we have. And even that is only till the next payment comes due. We don't have a mortgage. We don't have student loans. We haven't had that stuff for years. No auto loans. And yet we still have an 800 plus credit score. So you don't have to have all kinds of different types of credit in order to have a high credit score. You can just buy gas with your credit card and it's going to be fine. Okay, a few things to keep in mind about credit. You should review your credit report once a year-ish is probably fine. It's free to do that. I think the website's annualcreditreports.com, maybe. Let me double check that. Yeah, annualcreditreport.com, and you can get your credit score or your credit report from the 3 agencies. Sometimes they don't give you the score unless you pay a little bit extra. But frankly, as long as there's nothing inaccurate on there and you don't have some terrible credit report, your score is going to be fine. You might consider freezing your credit. If you're worried about fraud, you can freeze it. And then before you apply for any new credit, you've got to go in and unfreeze it. Some people even freeze their kids' credit. They've got a 2-year-old and they've frozen their credit and they're going to leave it frozen for decades. I don't know that we ever bothered to do that, but it would be, the most protected way to protect your kid from some financial scam while they're a teenager or whatever, and maybe worth doing. All right, I hope that's helpful. Yes, pay a little bit of attention to your credit score. Yes, it can help you a little bit in your life. It's probably a pain to try to buy a mortgage. You can do it. You can do manual underwriting with some mortgage companies if you don't ever borrow any money whatsoever, but that's a little bit of a pain. It's just way easier to buy your gasoline on a credit card at the pump. It's more convenient anyway, and just have a credit score and a reasonable credit history that allow you to do everything you need to do with both credit and a credit score during your life.
The hosts of The White Coat Investor are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is for your entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.